Hello, leaders. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, wherever you are around the world. It's our joy to welcome you again to the Executive Network Leadership Broadcast, coming to you live from Division International. This platform, like I normally say, is designed to raise leaders, to equip leaders, and to help each one of us to get better at what we're currently doing at the moment, whether you're working as a professional or you're in training, or even if you're working from home as a mom, as a dad, or whatever it is that you do, this platform is designed just for you. And we know that through our engagement, we're able to bring so much value to one another so that we all can become the best that we are born to be. If you're new to this platform, I'd like to welcome you. In particular, I want to welcome Temitope, who's joining us for the first time. Welcome. And also Awa, who's joining us from London, and a few other leaders who are joining us or are on their way. We'd like to welcome you. Today, we will be looking at the title that we mentioned last week, which is the principles of effective questioning. That is, using questions to our advantage, how leaders can maximize the power of questions. Um, by the way, last week was very exciting, wasn't it? We had Trista with us, and Trista presented the topic visionary leadership, which I'm sure everyone really enjoyed. In fact, I've been hearing a lot of feedback and good reviews from all of our leaders, and it was really exciting. So, just in case you want to catch up on that presentation, you can always go to the YouTube channel or to Facebook, on our channel on Facebook, and just you know get and look at it again, and I'm sure you will pick even more, one thing or the other in addition. So, without further ado, I would just like to quickly acquaint our new people who are joining us for the first time with the platform. If you would like to leave a comment, or maybe you'd like to just know your thoughts, or you have a question, you can use the chat button that is to the top right hand corner of your screen. So just click on that and type your question or your comments, and I will do my very best to air them so that everyone can learn from your unique insight. So, welcome once again, and let's get on with it. Now, the objectives of this presentation today is to look at, in the first instance, the power of questions. What's really, the power of questions? Then again, we like to look at the importance of asking great questions each and every time. In other words, how do we uh, use questioning to draw out value from other people in every environment? I mean, when I say other people, that could be colleagues, that could be people who are in positions of authority or who are superior to us in everyday dealings, or even people that we are responsible for training or for educating. How do we use questions to create a learning environment? And of course, we want to look at how personal leadership is affected by great questions. We've been dealing a lot on personal leadership since the beginning of the year, and we want to see how personal leadership can, our personal leadership development can get even better by using great questions. And of course, we want to look at how to manage relationships and protect oneself by asking relevant questions. I just remember what Trista said last week when she did say that if you are in a team or in a particular place and you want to get the best out of it, it's always useful to ask the leader where are we going? Now that protects you, and so you can decide whether that environment is the best for you or whether you need to make any timely decision. So as we progress, let's look at why questions are important. Why are questions important? Now, questions are effective ways to get answers. I mean, that looks like disingenuous. You only get answers to questions that you ask. In other words, if we don't ask questions, then we may not be able to actually draw out answers that already exist. And I'm sure very soon you're going to appreciate why I've written that statement. By the way, I was recently taught by the great leadership authority, John Maxwell, and most of what I'm saying tonight were drawn out of the teaching I received from him. So asking the right questions is the surest path to getting right answers. I remember those times when I was in the university and you want to maybe write a program. One of the things you first ask yourself is, what are we trying to achieve? You want to know what the criteria of success are. And you want to know what you need to do and what you should not do. You want to know how to protect the program in case something goes wrong. And so those are questions that you ask before you even embark on writing the program. So, and researchers will be used to that that mode of working, that you first list your research questions before you go on to do all of your experiments and document them. So asking questions is definitely a sure path to getting right answers. Another thing is that questions unlock and open doors that would otherwise remain closed. So questions actually help us to get access to certain doors that we may not have access to otherwise. And that's because opportunities exist behind closed doors. And that's why sometimes I listen to footballers when they say that, I've been knocking at the door for some time and now I have my opportunity. So in other words, the opportunities exist there, but the drive of the player to actually go ahead and demand opportunities through the right attitude, through self-improvement, all of that put together actually help to unlock the doors that might not have been accessible to that player. So questions grant access or help us to find access into closed doors. Another insight is that questions are most effective means to connect with people. If you meet somebody on the road, and I think maybe like myself, this might have happened to you. If you're traveling on the road and suddenly you can't find your way and you stop someone and say, please, can you tell me how to get to point so. Now, even though you don't know that person before that time, the person feels maybe some sympathetic obligation to respond to you to say, okay, well, if you take, turn to the right, turn to the left, then you get to where you're going. So at least it creates some kind of instant bonding, instant connection to be able to draw value. So questions actually make connections, help us to gain connections with hearts and minds of people. If a teacher wants to really get the most out of the class, if the teacher starts by asking questions that sort of create interest, arouse interest in the minds of students, I think that class is perhaps likely to get even more exciting and will be probably more positioned for learning than if this teacher just comes in and just starts, dictating lesson away. So I think that questions are actually effective means of connecting with people. Not only that, questions actually cultivate humility and meekness. When someone asks a question, the sort of thing that comes to our mind is that this person is willing to learn. And so questions are, they actually create learning environment. So if you meet somebody and you ask him a question, maybe in an interview, you meet a leader and you ask him about how he's achieved his great success, that dynamics actually changes and positions you as the student and puts the person you are asking those questions to as the leader. So questions actually create learning environment. And you see, one of the reasons why I'm looking at this topic is so that we can learn to seize opportunities at every moment. In fact, I'm hoping that this way almost trigger our minds to create learning environment anywhere we go. An environment where there's always free exchange of ideas, where people can learn, where people can develop, and where we are giving value and at the same time receiving values from people who are qualified to teach us. So that statement, I think, is a bit revealing. It says a leader must be willing to relinquish being right in order to find what's right. So, if I think I'm right, what that does to me is it shuts the door to receiving input. So leaders that we are, we should, let me not use must, we should be willing to relinquish that state of mind that, oh, I'm right, so that we can, receive input to know what could be better. Another thing is that questions actually help us to engage. They help us to engage with others in conversation in order to connect with the values in others. When we ask questions, when we ask people questions, what we are saying inadvertently is that you actually value the insight that they possess. I remember growing up, I used to hang around my grandmom a lot. And most of the time, I would want to know what happened in their days. So I would ask them how much they used to sell a whole cow, just so that I can more or less have a window into the past. And of course, asking those questions, triggers a lot of, sometimes joyful memories. And she would then go on and on and on. And I just sit down there like a baby, just, sucking away from from historical events. And sometimes she tells me, what they did, how they used to walk from one town to another, and you begin to wonder, wow, so these people had, they did a lot of these great things in the past. So, but the thing that brings that about is the fact that, I wasn't aware of all this. I just thought I was just kind of chatting with my grandma, but I was simply using question to draw out from our experience. And that's what happens when we engage with people using questions. We're saying that there's value inside of you, and I would like you to please share that value with me. Again, questions allow us to build better ideas. Why? We may have a good idea already, but that idea could by every means be better if we are open to the input from other people. So, and that's what people call shared thinking, in which case you're not just looking at what but you're looking at what other people know that could improve an idea that is good as it is. And this is one of the reasons why questions are so important. Another thing is that questions help to boost creativity. They give us a different but valuable perspective to the way we look at things. And of course, people who have spent a lot of time in the academic environment, they do this a lot, where you're looking at the researches that were done previously by a particular author on the same subject. And so you're seeing where the person was coming from, and you're then bringing in your own unique insight, and you have a more robust insight into that area of study. But it's not just in the academic environment. even in the business environment, in the industry, the ability or the willingness to open up to the perspectives of other people actually help to create, in fact, they've helped us to create some of the best products that we have today. And this is why we must begin to, use questions even better than we've ever did. So, and just a quick note on that, questions also help us to actually correct wrong assumptions, because there are things that we were saying, we thought we knew them. In fact, I'll give you a very a very personal example just now. I was working on my internet connection at home, and for some reasons, I actually crisscrossed the wire, so that I was now receiving um, half of the signal strength that I should be getting, and I thought everything was okay. I mean, thinking after all, I'm an IT professional, but when I then give a call um, to the customer service, I just saw my folly that apparently my connection was wrong, and that was why I was getting very poor internet connectivity. So, and that's what happens. Questions help us to correct wrong assumptions. Questions should also challenge mindsets, opening us to an entirely new world. And in fact, questions are vital links between discovery and innovation. They help us through questions we've been able to have so much discovery in the world. And as a matter of fact, most innovations that we see today were born out of questions. Direct questions, indirect questions, questions that life threw at us, questions that the environment press on us. They are reasons why we have continued innovation. The quest to find solutions, to find cure to diseases, the quest to do things faster and better. These are things that, they are questions that continually make I would hope, make the world a better place. But of course, even at that, we know that sometimes some innovation aren't all that good for us or but the question is, even those that are born, they think both destructive and constructive innovation are actually born out of questions. So good questions inform, but great questions transform. So I mean, the key thing is we can ask questions that in themselves they're just good. They you know they get certain things done. They open us to certain insight. But learning to ask great questions can actually have transformative effects. I remember the man Ben Carson, the famous neurosurgeon. Before he goes to do a surgery, when he finds out that the chances of success are quite slim, he would always ask himself, what happens if we do not try? And that question always kind of stimulate the mind of everyone in his team to say, okay, let's do the very best we can. And more often than not, they actually got successful results. I mean, they were able to separate Siamese twins, conjoined twins, and all that. And that's born out of asking themselves great questions. In the past, maybe 100 years ago, if you have conjoined twins, it'll probably be, oh, well, this is the end of the world. Let's just hope for the best and all that. But questions were asked progressively that made men and women to be able to look at other ways of solving age-long questions, age-long issues that wouldn't have been able to that we wouldn't have been able to solve otherwise. So great questions actually have transformative effects. So now, in asking questions, there are a few ways I've looked at it. Now, we can ask ourselves questions, or we can allow other people to ask us questions. One of them is reactionary, while the other is actually proactive. So, most of the time, when a leader waits before questions are asked of him, I think is most often it's too late. So, I would think that a leader will have that attribute of proactivity to actually ask questions of himself or herself before the public or the larger society actually asks those questions. So now, not only are we looking at that perspective, we're also looking at what questions can I also ask people around me, and then when I say people around me, we can put that into different strata. What can I ask my colleagues? What can I ask people that I'm responsible for? And what questions can I ask people that are greater than me in their influence? So let's for a start look at questions that you must or you should ask yourself as a leader. This platform, for all intent and purposes, is designed to help young leaders, emerging leaders, or even leaders who are already growing in their influence to see better ways of bearing their influence, of bringing about better and more progressive influence. So let's look at this very quickly. So now, one question I think that is very great to start with is that question of personal growth. And it's simply this: am I growing as a person? Am I developing as a person? Or am I stagnating? And I think this is important because it helps us to shake ourselves out of the status quo. So, in doing this, there are a few suggested things to look at. And the first is, what is my self image or my concept of myself? Am I growing in my perception? Am I getting truer and truer in my perception of myself? The other one is a question of your vision. Well, thankfully, last week we spoke a lot about vision. And not because we haven't heard anything about vision before, but it just serves as a way to remind or to reinforce the ideas in our mind. And even personally, only yesterday, I was speaking to a few young people on purpose and vision. And it's something that maybe at more than ever in history, we seem to be talking a lot around that. And well, I think that there is an historic prediction that seems to be getting fulfilled in that. But the point I'm making is that as a leader, personal growth has a lot to do with understanding, developing, and fulfilling the vision of our lives. So that's one area to consider as well, that in growing, where am I in the fulfillment of the vision of my life? And that could trigger a few questions. So if I haven't really given it that much thought, do I need to do something about it? And we saw, at least for a second time last week, that vision actually precedes the leader. Without vision, there can be no leadership, because leadership is action, leadership is a journey, but a journey to where? Now, unless the destination or the end is in view, then leadership can never be effective, and in fact may not even exist, because we cannot lead people to nowhere. And that's why the vision of the end should be clear to the leader. So how much clarity am I gaining, or am I getting in the vision of my life? And of course, the other one is my circle of influence. How am I growing in my ability to bring about change, to inspire the people in my circle, my friends, my colleagues, and all that, my family even? How am I growing in that journey? Am I being seen as somebody who can add value, or am I being ignored because, well, they can't even figure out what I'm about? So that is one area of personal growth that uh, every leader ought to ask himself or herself. The other question is a question of motivation, which is, what do I do what I do? And do I truly value people? I like to talk about this a bit because for me, when we talk about loving other people, I think it boils down to the concept of value. Do I actually value people? Because if I value people, now, to what extent do I value those people? What is my estimation of those people? If I don't value somebody as myself, it is impossible for me to love them as myself. And that is something that, it's very important. And the other thing, am I genuinely interested in other people? You know, and I like to say this, that meaning is always in the mind, not even in action, because my action may disguise my intention. And in fact, my speech can actually disguise my intention. So, but the individual knows himself. Each person can weigh his action and actually be and choose to be true to himself and say, are my actions actually void of ulterior motives? The other question to look at is that of stability, which is, do I have a healthy sense of importance? Do I have a healthy sense of myself? And in that, we're looking at things like humility, which is understanding our place in the bigger picture, authenticity, which is being comfortable in one's own skin, and of course, looking at our calling. Do I actually see a purpose that is bigger than myself, or is it just all about me? These are things that we need to look at. Now, one of the things that I'm hoping will happen on this platform through our engagement is that we're not just learning for ourselves or sharing these ideas, we're also looking at how to use these materials to actually help other people, work with other people, so that we are also bearing value to other people. Another area to look at is that of teamwork. Can I work with people effectively? Am I adding value to my team? These are things to consider. That not just for ourselves, but we can also even help other people to consider these thoughts. And of course, suggestions to mitigating that is to say, well, is to begin to promote full commitment wherever we are, and then create an atmosphere of encouragement and support so that people feel they feel good around us. There's nothing wrong with that. I wouldn't like people to be uncomfortable around me. And of course, once I say that, I become a bit edgy myself. I like to know that, well, it's going to be that there's something, there's something I'm doing that is unhelpful to other people. And the other thing is to look at challenges as opportunities for, improvement and character development. And of course, is to help team members to stay in their areas of strength. This is very important. I find that sometimes, because of the need at hand, there's that temptation to kind of draw people out of what they do naturally, or something that they do better or do best, and kind of suck them into something that is a struggle for them. So they are neither joyful nor happy or able to do it well, and the work is not getting done anyway. So, and this is something that I think we need to also look at. Then the other question is that of effectiveness. Am I actually staying in my area of strength? Personally, I don't like doing something that I have no gifting for. I like to be just like a fish inside water. When a fish is in water, you don't need to teach it smartness. It just swims. A bird does not need to be taught how to fly. It just flies. But if we ask certain birds to swim, some of them do swim. If you ask certain birds to swim, maybe a kite, then we're creating problem because kite is not designed to swim. The birds that could swim, like ducks, they already have adaptation for them. They have the potentials for swimming. Okay, so it's about being in our areas of strength, and being in that area. Do we sense opportunities to convert our strength into greater opportunities to serve or to improve our environment? Another question is that of success, which is that even though we're looking at a vision for a future, which is inspiring, but are we actually losing sight of today? And are we taking care of today? All of these, they are things I'm thinking of personally myself, because we must all constantly evaluate and reevaluate ourselves. And there is no arrival in the journey, in this journey of being the leader we are born to be. We have to keep going on. I believe that there is no retirement in the game of life. Retirement means one thing, and so we it's something that as long as we have breath and strength and energy, we have to keep on at it. And of course, the other one is the concept of, or the thought of, return on investment, which is that for every investment I'm doing, my energies, how I'm spending my time and energy, am I actually doing that with the right people? Am I imposing myself on people, or am I actually with people who are open to learning and they are open to receive input? So leaders are actually obligated to invest in future leaders, but leaders also would know not to waste time with people who are simply not interested. It's easier, I think, to work with somebody who wants to than somebody who does not want to. Now, these are a few thoughts that I was able to extract earlier on today. And Socrates, the great philosopher in Greece, in years gone by, made a statement that the unexamined life is not worth leading. And John Maxwell, the leader from whose thought I was able to gather most of this material, did say that he added to that statement by Socrates that, well, not only is the unexamined life not worth leading, the unexamined life is also not worth following. And that sounds to reason. My great mentor did say that leadership is obligated to mentor. And of course, leadership without succession is failure. So now, let's say the equivalent in scriptures. Solomon, the great leader, the third king of Israel, said that nothing that I've worked for or had worked for an end meant a thing to me, because I knew that I would have to leave it to my successor. And it might be wise or it might be foolish, who knows? Yet, he will own everything I've worked for, everything my wisdom has earned for me in this world. It's all useless. So I came to regret that I had worked so hard. You work for something with all your wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then you have to leave it all to someone who hasn't had to work for it. It is useless, and it isn't right. Now, of course, we know that Ecclesiastes is a book of it's a book of paradox, which is that it was the reminiscence of a leader who seemed to be in a particular state in life. But the point is that rather than taking a chance on succession, I would say it's better to actually do something about succession in a proactive sense, in a way that actually invests in future leaders, so that one is not left wondering. And when I say this, we are actually doing it every day. We have our children, we have our grandchildren, we have our cousins, we have our friends, we have our colleagues at work, and we are actually doing it every day. But if we are not intentional in helping to develop leaders, then we will be in that state that Solomon was, where one is wondering, well, what would the next successor do? And this could be as simple as, okay, I've got my children to be with me at least for the first 20, 25 years of their lives. If one doesn't intentionally put in values into them, then one is left wondering about what they would do when they leave the house to go to the schools or to, later on in life. Not just that, if somebody is a manager in a department in a company and does not give time to actually develop the next leader that will take over that department, well, you can almost be sure that if a wrong person steps into that role, then all of the effort of the leader, it goes to waste. So this could be even as simple as that, without thinking about, later on in life. So, and that's why Solomon was in that state of regret, actually, rather than being confident. I can tell you somebody who was probably more confident. David, his own dad, did a good job at putting a son on the throne while he was still alive. And I said that's how to actually take care of succession. So that's something that I think is worth thinking about. Now, what questions do I ask colleagues or, say, teammates or friends or contemporaries? Now, good leaders ask inspiring questions that expand the minds and horizon of others. Because colleagues are people that, somehow we maybe work brings us together. Friends, it might be that life actually brings us together. But even at that, friends who are valuable constantly have that knack of, doing things in a way that actually make the friendship better, giving value to everyone within that community of influence. The same thing goes for people at work. So questions such as, what do you think I should do? Or what do you think we should do? That is an inviting question that is inviting the input of other people, rather than saying, well, I've already figured it out and I don't want any other input. Just leave it as I've done it. Well, I don't think that's all that helpful. But what do you think is a great way of actually bringing out people's value? Look at that expression there. It says, when you ask for my passion, you get my heart. When you ask for my ideas, you get my mind. But when you ask me for answers, you not only get my passion and my ideas, you actually get my strength, my heart, and my mind. So that's beautiful, actually. So how can I serve you is another question we can ask. How can I serve you? And this question is actually saying that, look, I may actually be in a position to bear influence on someone, but if I come with the mind of serving that person, it actually shows that I'm not intimidating the fellow by my position. As a matter of fact, I think this is a great antidote to the pitfalls of positional leadership, in which the position is not what makes me relevant. It's actually my ability to serve the people I'm responsible to and for that actually makes a difference. Another question is, what do I need to communicate effectively? And this could be a range of things, which could be, well, what has happened before I came in? What has been happening around? What's going on in the society? If I'm asked to speak, say, in the Middle East, I mean, it will be smart enough to know exactly the context of that society, that environment, to know their peculiar challenges, to know their culture, how they think, so that I can actually speak within their context. Now, my content will be useless if I can't speak within their context. And that's why effective communication actually comes from knowing the context more than the content. The context has to do with applicability. Is it applicable? Is it usable? Does it fit in the environment? Another question is, did we meet and exceed expectations? This is great for colleagues at work. which is that, well, we're actually responsible for delivering a particular project. Did we actually exceed the expectations? Or did we just get by? Did we just sort of stumbled over the line? So it's not just performing the task that's the issue, but is that, was it actually done with excellence? Another question, which sometimes if you are working with people, let's say you're a manager and you have people in your team, I think this question is very good, which is, letting people know or prompting them to think about what they learn or are learning. So what did you learn? Now, John Maxwell did say that experience is not the best teacher. Evaluated experience is actually the better teacher. All right. So now another question is, what did we add value? Which is, yes, we've done the task, but did we add value in the process? So I think it should be a prerogative to seek to add and multiply the value of others, which is in a personal sense and in other contexts, to say that we actually multiply and add to them in value. Another question, how do we maximize opportunities? And that I came up with that phrase just today, that success actually is its own seed, which is that success should actually be seen as an input for greater success. So the seed of success, of future success, is success. So rather than resting on our oars, it should be that we use current success as a motivation for greater ones. Now, other questions could be, what do I need to know? So other people actually possess wisdom and insight that can save us from waste and embarrassment. So what do we need to know before we do what we want to do? Another question, what am I missing? Am I missing something here? And you see, when I ask somebody, am I missing something? I'm actually asking that person to help me improve. I'm telling the person indirectly that, look, I'm aware that I'm vulnerable. Protect me. And, that is so empowering, not just to the person that we are asking that question to, but also for us as individuals. It just means that we've learned to get over ourselves. Right? Now, what are we missing collectively now? And that could be for a team. In other words, against our checklist, are we able to tick each item? And of course, I've seen that this sort of question actually saves time. Otherwise, if we miss something, we may have to redo it. I remember back in the day, if you have to take your car to a workshop for repairs, and for some reason, something was, maybe the screw, the nut of the tire was not put in correctly, we know what that could cause. So is that sort of the thing that we're talking about, we're referring to when we're talking about what are we missing? So in team engagement, we ought to value and demonstrate value for the contribution of our teammates, because that helps to actually foster better relationships as we work together. So, and this is a suggestion, I just think it's always good to allow the best idea to win. And the best idea does not have to come from me. The best idea doesn't have to come from the team leader. And that is just saying that, that alludes again to what we discussed earlier on, the concept of value, the value estimation of the persons or the people around us. Do I actually value them as myself? If I value you as myself, then when you give me input, I'm not struggling with my ego to receive it, because I know you are as valuable as me. So your input is as valid as mine. So I will happily take on your input to improve. So now, how do I actually lead myself successfully? What can I do? What can we do to develop in our personal leadership? And I think the first thing to actually look at, and I think we've spoken about this over time, which is that personal leadership actually comes first before any other leadership. In fact, personal leadership actually makes all of that kind of leadership. I mean, by that I mean corporate leadership, national leadership. It makes all of that possible. Examples abound around us that already let us see that personal leadership, failure in personal leadership actually becomes catastrophe in the public. So I think this environment is an opportunity for us to actually, make our mistakes in-house, address them before we even begin to take on larger responsibilities in the public. I think so. Now, so one question to think about there is, why should anyone be led by me? That should be LED. So why should I lead anyone? Why should anyone listen to me actually? Have I earned the respect of other people so they can listen to me? Because I don't think respect is not automatic. Respect ought to be earned. Now, why does leading myself seem more difficult than leading others? I don't know what to think, but I also find this, very true in my personal life, that sometimes if it looks as if, working with other people, sort of in a context, leading them seems to be more difficult than leading myself. And, we all know ourselves and we know our vulnerabilities. And we're wondering that, well, but I know better, I shouldn't do this. But why do we still do them? Well, there are a few thoughts here, and I think all of those can be put under the phrase, that those two words: we all have blind spots. And in fact, that is the more reason why we actually need the input of others, and ask questions that can help us improve. And some of those blind spots include having a singular perspective on things, just my own view or no other view. So, and that, it creates a blind spot because we only see from our eyes, and the eyes are in the front. We hardly ever know what's going on behind us. And that's why we need some other eyes to help us see the stain at the back of our shirt. Now, another thing could be insecurity, which is one is not that comfortable, and so you're willing to protect, become defensive, become protective of yourself, only because, well, there's a sense of insecurity. Now, these are not fatal. I mean, they don't have to be fatal. We can do something about them. That's why we're using this opportunity to actually highlight them for all of us, so that we can grow together and at least give ourselves to the world as better gifts in the leadership context. Another thing, therefore, in line with that insecurity, is unhealthy ego, unhealthy sense of self, unhealthy self-evaluation. And of course, it's not all of this, there could be more, but also weakness in character is also another thing that actually creates blind spots. And all of this blind spot, what they do is that they limit our capacity to lead. They limit our capacity to be positive influence in a larger context. Now, let's look at a few questions about leadership. Now, one of them is, do we really all have potential to be effective leaders? Well, going by all of our discussions up to now, I think the answer is yes. We all actually do. But the extent to which we bring out those potentials, will vary, naturally so. They say all fingers are not equal, don't they? So that is it. But we can actually do our very best to develop those potentials. And I think that's actually our primary work. Now, anyone and everyone actually has the potential to lead at some level. So regardless of where we are at this point, we are actually leading already at this level, and we have that potential to do so. But not just that, we all have the potential, the capacity to become better at leading ourselves and at leading other people. But there are some factors that affect our capacity to lead, and we'll look at those very quickly. One of them is the environment. where we are. When I say environment, it's not just physical environment, it's also the mental environment, the things that educate our minds. In fact, it could also be the culture that surrounds us, the culture that produces us. So, does my environment help or inhibit my capacity to lead? That's something to think about. The other one is exposure. What are my experiences and are they really helpful into developing the leader that I am? Am I actually inspired to lead by my experience, by the experience that I'm having? And one of the things that is probably helpful in this is if you know somebody that you actually like to listen to, it's always good to buy the CD of that person, go to the seminar that they do, so that you can get inspired. I remember when I was with my siblings in the university in University of Ibadan. I remember listening to one man who was actually kind of he had a particular handicap, and I saw him playing the keyboard. I mean, I tell you, that was the biggest inspiration that I had in that year. It literally affected my confidence, and I felt like if this man with this handicap could do this, then I have no excuse not to do what I know I'm capable of doing. And afterwards, I was able to, I was very, very young at that time, but I gained confidence to stand before people who are much older than me, and I was able to deliver some value to them. And that's what I'm saying, that that was accidental almost, but we can be intentional in going to environments that help us to improve. The other one is equipping, which is that am I intentional in developing my leadership potential? I don't think we should leave anything to chance. We ought to be intentional, deliberately. No, look at this platform. I mean, at this time, I know all of us could be doing something else. We could, kind of sit down in front of the sofa, just kind of relax after a hard day job. So it's highly commendable to me that we are taking this time out to just sort of look at some kind of input into our continuous development. And I actually salute, your commitment to this. So, but this environment, for example, is actually intentional. This is a very deliberate effort that rather than complaining about leadership in some part of the world, why don't we do something about it, even if it's just one person at a time? And that's why we're doing this. Now, let's look at factors that challenge leaders. The greatest challenge that leaders face today is actually making decisions that affect other people. And I think this actually affects all of us. If you're a parent, if as parents we're making decisions that affect our children, as people at work, we're making decisions that affect other businesses, colleagues, and even families, because those people at work come from certain families, one family or the other. As a national leader, you're making a decision that influences and affects the whole country. So people decision is actually something that one of the greatest challenge that leaders face. I remember hearing Obama most of the time when he would say that he thinks long and hard before he actually instruct some kind of military effort. And that's because those decisions sometimes are totally irreversible. So leaders must be willing to, and this is something that, in response to the challenge that we face, we must be willing to make tough decisions. And those decisions may be uncomfortable for the moment, but we should have the courage to make them nonetheless. And talking about courage is asking this question: what must be done? I mean, I salute my dad a lot. He helped me. In fact, he actually put me in certain environments that taught me the lessons of life. And I'm ever grateful for that. I mean, for example, rather than loafing around when I left, in secondary school, he actually made me work. And that perhaps was one of the best investment actually made in my life, because that experience made me to grow, to have a sense of responsibility as a teenager. I mean, you wouldn't know, we have never discussed it before, but um, that was something that I value up till now. I learned to earn money. I learned to be responsible for someone else's business. I learned to be trusted in the business. I learned to work with other people on the business. I gained confidence to make decisions. And well, all of that actually all of that contributed to what I am now. I learned to be proactive. And again, another question is a question of priority. What must be done first? What must be done first? And this question is very important, and we face this every day, every time, when we have competing alternatives and we have to make a decision. So, what must be done first? And sometimes we don't actually get those things right, but we have to make decisions one way or the other. And so, these are things that challenges that we face, and we must have the courage to take those decisions. Another one is the question of change. What must be done differently from this point on? Because changes, the changes that actually are best are changes that we initiate. If we changes will happen anyway, but if we want to stay in a proactive sense, it's always advisable to actually initiate a change that will create an alternative and a better experience. So it's always asked what must be done differently. And is that of creativity, which is what is possible. I like to ask myself that a lot. What's possible? What's possible? What can I do with what I have now? I want to do something with what I have now. What not what I'm going to have later. What can I do now? What can I do now? What's possible? And that question always triggers creativity. I remember growing up as well. My dad would say, go and find me something I can use to block this thing. I'm wondering, well, I don't know where to find it, but that thing was actually developing a sense of observation. And, all of those things add up in life, and they form what we are. And of course, there's also the people question, which is who should be involved in what I'm doing and who should not be involved, because a wrong team member can wreck the whole organization. And this is something that, I remember Jesus, before he could select his team, he had to pray all night. And in fact, he also knew when he was choosing somebody that would betray him. So that was a strategic decision. So as we begin to round up now, let's look at very briefly learning from great leaders. And this is something that I would strongly suggest that we I know we do it already, but to become even more intentional in doing them. Now, leaders cultivate and maintain a learning attitude. And as well, they actually create learning environments. Leaders should keep a diary of questions. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Personally, I have a place in my notepad where I write questions that I want answers to. In fact, when I was growing up in the university days, I actually wrote some questions about marriage. And those questions actually, I found that I saw those questions after over 10 years. And I'm glad I wrote those questions, because those things, they have a way of influencing our decisions. So I recommend that we keep a diary of questions, because those who ask questions end up with answers. Now, leaders use questions to feed from mentors. So if we have any mentors in our life, which we can make the most of that relationship by actually using questions to feed from their experience, from their knowledge. I mean, that includes our parents, that includes superiors at work, which is, how can I learn from what this person knows? A question automatically puts one in the position of a student and elevates the other party into the position of a teacher. And if you give somebody some value, make them feel better about themselves, they are more willing to tell you what they know. But if I ask a question like, I really don't care, the person just said, well, why should I care as well? So leaders should be proactive in asking questions and creating the learning atmosphere. In other words, the leaders, we as emerging leaders, we should not wait for people to ask us questions. I mean, most mentors are very busy anyway. And so my mentors tell me that, well, I'm busy. We shouldn't expect them to come around and ask us, so what are you doing now? What's your plan? No, we should proactively engage with them and ask questions. It's as if you're kind of drilling a borehole, and you're drilling and drilling until suddenly you create a gusher and the water begins to fill the well. And I think that's what we should be doing, really. And leaders learn to speak less and to question more in the presence of mentors. I mean, this is valuable. I actually learned this from Dr. Miles Monroe, that he says, when I'm in the presence of a great man, I just turn myself to a student automatically, and I use my question to draw from their words of experience. And I recommend this a lot. Now, leaders ask questions to learn, not to compete or embarrass mentors. There are people who can ask questions that are actually embarrassing. That should never be our intent as leaders, as people who are growing in leadership capacity. We should be using questions to learn, to create a school. Remember, we said the other time that the school actually is not a building, it's the person. And that's why we have the concept of schools of thought. We are going to the school of the thought of the great leaders around us. And in fact, even if you have never met a leader before, if you write some very good questions and send to them, they are more obliged to be more interested in you as a person and in asking and answering those questions. Right. So learning from the wisdom of the great, leaders cultivate a learning attitude, and that's a repetition. And we're not really looking to embarrass our mentors. Now, deep wells. I picked this from scriptures. Proverbs 18 verse 4 says, the words of a man's mouth are like deep waters, and the fountain of wisdom like a flowing brook. Now, this applies both to us and to the people around us. There are deep-seated wisdom locked up in the minds of people that are around us, and we can trigger them, proactively. That even ourselves, in our respective capacity, we have fountains locked of experiences of wisdom locked up inside of us. In fact, we even have things that we wish we never did, and we hope that no one else does that sort of thing. So the point is that every one of us, we have things that can literally change the life of someone else. I took a different translation of this, and it says, a person's words can be a source of wisdom, deep as the ocean, fresh as a flowing stream. Another one here, it says, words of wisdom are a stream that flows from a deep fountain. Words of wisdom are comparable to streams that flow from deep fountain. And that's what happens when we trigger the wisdom in the minds of people. It begins to flow like a gusher, and they talk to us. I remember one of those days when I sat with Dr. Miles Monroe and I asked him a question, and he spent over 20 minutes to answer that question. Now, that session literally changed my outlook, and I really changed my life because it affected my decision. I was able to think from a totally different perspective that I would perhaps have never known. And if I would know it, maybe it would take me under 10 years to learn it. So, and that's what we're talking about. Now, again, look at this. It says, wisdom in the heart of man is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. And this is talking about being an expert in questioning, an expert interviewer, which is that, yes, Wisdom experiences may be locked up in the mind of people around us, but we can use our insight, our a unique knack to draw those things out, those inspirations, those experiences out. This is even a more clearer way to look at it. A person's thoughts are like water in a deep well, but someone with insight can draw them out. And let me tell you, my utmost delight or desire is that we here become masters at using insightful means to draw out thoughts, wisdom, experiences in the mind of people. And especially when we meet somebody who is advanced in age, we should be looking to get everything out inside of them. Everything, really. Again, and this is attempting to round up now. Matthew 7, verse 7 says, "Ask, and it shall be given to you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it will be open to you." Which means asking will always precede receiving. Searching will always precede finding. And access would always be preceded by knocking. And knocking actually is another word for asking for opportunities. Now look at this. I took it out and I think it's even clearer. And I like this in context because it says, keep asking and it will be given to you. That says something to me, that asking once is not enough, because there are times when we speak to mentors and they just don't have the opportunity. For example, one of my mentors, when I call him, sometimes he's not able to pick his phone, but it is incumbent on me to ask again. And in fact, asking again is proof of genuine desire. I mean, it was Miles, I think Mike Murdoch that said that you cannot get what you are unwilling to pursue. And pursuit is the proof of desire. So keep asking. And that puts it in the present continuous, which is a continuous repetitive task. And it says again, keep searching and you will find. Because the first search is not usually what brings out the goods. If we lost maybe some kind of valuable jewel in your bedroom, you may not find it if you begin to search for it the first time. It may take the repeated search to find it. And the last one says, keep knocking and the door will be open, because it may not be that the first time you ask for the opportunity that you get it. And that's why, the continuous knocking is it. And that's why he spoke a parable about a woman where he said that this woman, because of her importunity, was able to get the justice that she was looking for. Because she did not give up, she was able to get the justice she was asking for. And what happened, it was asking for justice from a particular judge who just wouldn't care. But this woman almost won this judge out by a continual coming. And I think I like this better because it actually lets us know that we ought not to give up the first time. And look at it, this is word of comfort. It says, for everyone who keeps asking will receive. In other words, it would not be forever. And the person who keeps searching will find. And the person who keeps knocking will have the door opened. So let's become resilient at getting back at it. Yes, even when we feel frustrated, let's kind of draw back, get more strength, and get back to it. Because some people say that good things sometimes don't come easy. So, well, this will be a place to round up for us, and I hope that you're able to pick one or two things. I mean, I was hoping that we were to have a question and answer time, but I think we've really spent a lot of time on the discourse. Yes, I like what one of our respondents said. You earn respect, you don't demand it. Someone said that Right environment is key to fulfillment. Another leader said that indeed the best idea does not need to come from me. Well, that's very great. I like those insights. That's right. Leaders must reproduce. Well, this is great. Thank you very much, leaders. And this is the sort of engagement I would like to see. And of course, if you have questions, it would be nice to um, maybe you can actually send your questions ahead of time so that we can look at them and they form input into the discussion for the day. So, well, thank you very much for joining, especially for people who join us from for the first time. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and we look forward to hearing from you. We know you've been well. I can almost preempt you by saying that I think you've been cooking something for us to feed us with. So we are looking forward to it. So don't keep us hungry. So we're waiting for your insight to share to feed from your valuable insight. Let's feed from you. Let's feed from you. So thank you very much for joining us tonight, and God's blessings, and let's keep developing. God bless, and see you soon.